Welcome to this week's episode, The Fabric Not the Thread, Finding the Fray. This is part one of a two-part conversation about what it actually costs when your departments are running as loose threads instead of connected fabric, and why most organizations have all the pieces but haven't built a loom to hold them together.
It's so easy to get tunnel vision and to stick within your silo and say how fantastic your silo is doing, but then not expanding past your silo to take a look at the impact over the overall organization.
Highly Adaptive is a podcast where staffing and consulting leaders learn to outpace change. Hosted by Jeff Pelliccio and Erin MacKenzie, they'll cut through the noise to bring you practical moves you could use right now to grow, adapt, and lead. Every leader in the room agrees alignment matters. Connected teams win, and silos are the enemy. And yet only 31% of employees say they're actually engaged at work. That's a decade low. And 84% of marketers report that working across functions feels like dragging an anchor. Leaders want alignment, but most organizations haven't built a system to create it. Today, we're getting into what it really costs when your organization is threads without fabric, and what changes when someone finally builds the loom. The good news, we've got Anna Frazzetto joining us on this one, and she's lived this from the inside. She's seen what happens when departments actually connect and what falls apart when they don't. So if you ever felt like your teams are working hard but not working together, this one's going to be for you. Erin, let's tell them who we got here.
Ooh, this is fun. And I love that we're talking about looms and fabric and all the fun things that I don't know how to do anything with. But when we put it into the work world, I'm sure we can piece it together. But let me fill you in. So Anna Frazzetto is the founder and CEO of AFM Strategic Partners. And she's one of those leaders who doesn't just stay in her lane. She's built her career at the intersection of technology, sales, and business strategy across both the staffing and tech industries. She's held senior roles like chief revenue officer. She's managed global teams. She's got the rare mix of honestly like the big picture thinking and let's actually go fix it right now energy. So what makes today's conversation special is that Anna has lived the cross-functional challenge from the inside, as Jeff has stated, and she's honestly seen firsthand what happens when departments connect and what falls apart when they actually don't. So Anna, we are super excited to welcome you today to Highly Adaptive.
Oh my goodness, what a fabulous introduction. I can literally stop working for the rest of the week. That was phenomenal. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Love it. This is going to be so much fun. And so Anna, one of the things that we like to do is we like to kind of rip off the Band-Aid and get used to who is the person behind, who is Anna. So we always like to kind of learn a little fun fact about you. So if there's something that people don't know about you in your day-to-day or anything that you do, what is something interesting or fun about you that we can learn?
So that's a great question. Actually, I think most people don't know that I speak more than just English. I speak Italian, Spanish, and also Sicilian, which is a totally different language onto itself. So
Oh, wow.
I speak 4 languages. Some better than others, but I speak 4 languages.
I have Duolingo. Jeff is actually one of my friends on Duolingo, but I am terrible because I have Spanish, and then I'm also trying to learn Italian because I'm going to Italy in October. Yeah. So then I was like, Duo's not doing it for me. I'm like, I got to go and buy something else. So I just bought Babbel. And so, but the key to learning a language is you actually have to practice. So
you have to use it.
Agreed.
It's I'm not 100% there, nor 1% there yet. So this is amazing. I love it. And Sicilian is not in any of those. So that is something you don't see.
If you want to practice Italian, by all means, Erin, we can have conversations. And I think the key is focusing on being conversational and just learning some key phrases. You don't have to, sometimes they get too into the grammar of things, where if you're going there for vacation, you just need to be able to have certain phrases, certain words that you understand that makes your process a little bit easier while you're there.
As long as I can order a glass of wine and some pasta, I'm good to go.
So the big question here is, which language do you dream in, and which language do you think of when you're upset?
Oh, wow. Okay. What do I dream in? I think, honestly, I'm not really good at recalling my dreams, but I think it's probably a combination of Italian and English. Like because usually there might be family members. So I think I probably dream in both. When I'm angry? Oh, Sicilian, 100%. Like that's that, the best is my mother, God rest her soul. She would always say, like, I would be like ranting and raving. I'm upset with my husband about something. And then all of a sudden, he's asking, like, what is she talking about? And she's like, oh, don't worry. She loves you. And I'm like, meanwhile, I'm cursing him out in Sicilian,
Okay, so we know if you start speaking Sicilian to us, you're pissed off and mad at us.
That's right. That's right. So we'll have to make sure that the frustration level stays relatively low when we're going to talk about silos right now.
Yes,
otherwise people won't understand. So let's move into the topic at hand, right? So first things first, like everybody agrees that silos are bad, and yet nobody ever really like considers the actual cost. So what does organizational disconnection actually look like on a day-to-day basis? I mean, you've been working with a lot of different companies, both internally and externally. So not necessarily the theory, but in meetings and handoffs and missed signals, like what does that look like? What do people experience when that is their world, that is their existence?
It's the worst feeling ever when you have, especially disconnect between sales and marketing, for example, if we were to talk about those two functions, because I've been in organizations where marketing and sales report into two different areas. So I had the sales team and marketing reported to somebody else. But then meanwhile, the incentives or the goals for the marketing team would be something like taking a look at lead generation for your sales team. Right. And then meanwhile, they're bragging about how they're increasing the number of leads for the sales team. And I would ask a simple question. Well, what's the conversion rate? I mean, if I have 500 leads versus 1,000 leads, if my conversion is still zero, it doesn't matter how many leads I have.
Right.
And the disconnect. And so I find streamlining where sales and marketing are more aligned with each other will obviate any of those missed opportunities like we're talking about. Also measuring metrics that make sense, like conversion rate for leads. Sales could be, spinning so many different cycles to create leads. But if the leads don't match exactly the ICP criteria that the sales team is actually working off of, so therefore, all of a sudden, these leads don't mean anything. If they're not converting, for what reason are they not converting? Right? Getting to the bottom of that.
Yeah. And that too can be a siloed issue, right? So if marketing, I mean, just to stay in this world that you've sort of created here, right? If marketing is doing research and identifying that there are either certain trends, certain messaging, certain things that are associated with the given community that you're trying to address, and sales has their belief system based on what they're experiencing in the front line, and those conversations don't ever pass, then both could be right at the same time. But the marriage of efforts is going to be negligible at best, right? You're not going to get that higher strike point, that higher conversion rate that the organization wants, because you have fundamentally these departments that are operating in their own sort of vacuums.
Agreed, 100%. And, bear with me. Like, think about like what organizational structures look like 20 years ago. It was definitely a little bit more streamlined. You had your CEO, CFO, COO, CIO. That was pretty much it as far as who ran the organization, right? And then there was always the debate. Sometimes the CIO actually reported into the CFO, depending on how the organization was laid out. And often the COO acted as the one who was responsible for all of the operational functions within a company, right? Your sales, your marketing, whatever, back office, it pretty much ran the whole thing. Then as organizational structures started to evolve, you started having the birth of, you have a CRO, you have a CSO, you have a chief data officer, you have a chief marketing officer, right? So all of a sudden the C-suite has like quadrupled, in
They gave
size.
birth, Anna. They
They
gave birth
did.
to a whole bunch of baby other C's.
Right. But then what happens is then are they all peers and they all report into the CEO or that level? So now you start building these silos. You start creating this friction point, as opposed to there are certain functions that logically, in my mind, make sense that they should be together. And so you break those silos. Sales and marketing, to me, they should be hand in hand every step of the way. Right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, they have to be, because from your pitch decks to what you just talked about, like lead conversion to working together, it has to be a very, very woven partnership between the two. I've got a question for you, Anna. Like, when you're walking into like an organization, because you've seen this, you've seen as we have seen the growth of all of the C-suite and stuff. But when you're walking in, how quickly can you tell if like teams are either woven together or their threads are starting to separate?
Oh, fairly quick. I mean, you could tell fairly quick as soon as you have your first either leadership meeting or you start meeting with the team members and you start seeing that their objectives are not aligned with each other. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing like you meet with the CMO and he or she are bragging about what their goals are for the year. And then you take a look, how is that aligned with what the chief sales officer is trying to do from a revenue generation, or your chief revenue officer? And you see that they're operating from two completely different scripts. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, you can see the break in the process immediately if they're not aligned with each other.
I think it's interesting to also point out maybe like how we got here, right? So like, I think I agree with you, right? Back in the day, you had a far fewer heads in that C-suite area, far fewer titles in that C-suite end. But I think as the world got more complicated, as our resources, the tech stacks, the ecosystems that we managed, the environments where our communities lived, like as that stuff all got more complicated, I feel like the effort to create specialization within the C-suite made sense. I think where it tended to maybe miss the mark is the fact that they ended up losing anyone owning the full journey from end to end. So you might get someone who is now squarely focused in on this particular aspect of your organization, whether that be the technical piece or the sales piece or the marketing piece or the whatever the pieces are, the security piece. But in doing so, I feel like we failed as like organizations, like the Imperial we failed to actually maintain that necessity to have full end-to-end visibility, or at least have one person responsible for that full end-to-end responsibility versus just hoping that the coordination of these individuals would simply stitch it together,
Agreed, 100%. And someone could say that maybe the CEO is responsible for that, but let's face it, the CEO has so many things that they are responsible for, so it makes it very difficult. But I would take it a step further and say, when you're building the goals and the objectives for the organization for, the next fiscal year, how are they interlinked between each of the departments? So for example, if we talk about lead generation for marketing, going back to the example we used when we first started, why not have conversion rate as one of the metrics that marketing is going to be measured on? Right? So like that is the validity that those leads they're fantastic, because out of 1,000 leads, we are now converting 250 of them. That's awesome that we're converting that many. How do we increase the number? But that's how you can start interweaving, and getting past the silo mentality if the goals and objectives are interlocked with each other.
Which really calls attention to the fact that it's not just the sales and the marketing that you need to align, but it's also operations and tech. Because here's the thing, if you want to know what conversions had been influenced by your marketing efforts, then your technology has to be able to track that individual, and a process needs to be in place that requires your frontline team to also administer certain efforts inside of your software, your CRM or your ATS, so that way you can identify and secure your knowledge base on what is the origination, what was the influence, and then be able to track revenue as a result. Otherwise, you end up you still have a massive blind spot, right? Because now your marketing will say, we did these things, we delivered you leads that you asked for, but sales doesn't have a way to actually quantify which ones came in as a result of a marketing influenced effort. So the conversation really paints the picture as to like your more systemic issue organizationally.
And if you think about it, this is how you start interweaving all the groups. So you can still have the best of both worlds. You have the specialization where the reason why the organizational chart changed and it evolved into having more roles is because of the complexity, as you mentioned before. But now, if you have the goals and objectives that interlock each of the departments, you now have the best of both worlds. I have the subject matter expertise I need. And now I know that we're all driving to that same mission, right? And driving the company forward.
So true. I mean, and I look at every single department is really like a different color. It's a different color thread. And when you can weave all of those different threads together, then you're creating something beautiful. And if you have your metrics, you have a shared metrics, it's going to be the final product. It's going to be your rug or your blanket or when we kind of have everything all at once. But I think a lot of times what we find is like, most organizations already have all the threads they need. They just don't have the loom so they can actually take all those threads and weave them together. I think that's probably one of the key things. They like rush it, and there's a lot of different stringy pieces that are in there and not together.
Right. And that's
fair.
That's the challenge, right? Because what winds up happening is, how do you bring them all together is the key objective. It's so easy to get tunnel vision and to stick within your silo and say how fantastic your silo is doing, but then not expanding past your silo to take a look at the impact over the overall organization.
Completely. So I have like kind of thinking about all of this and looking through the lens of someone who's lived it. In your experience, have you ever been able to see like the actual business impact when like departments are operating as these islands? And what did that look like?
You know, there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I mean, we actually were tracking revenue loss when we had like technology was not supporting the initiatives that we were trying to do. And I think I had shared a stat that there was like 23% revenue loss because our back office or systems were not necessarily aligned with the services that we were providing as a company. So there's definite impact. I think it's foolish for us to think that an organization is not impacted when you operate so distinctly and separate from everyone else. I've also seen the benefit where there's been tremendous growth once you pull the groups together and you start interlocking those goals and objectives that I had mentioned. Then you start seeing the benefit. And trust me, it comes with a lot of pain because people are like, oh my goodness, now I got to worry about IT and what they're doing. You know, it's like they don't want to be interlocked with anybody else. But once you get into that rhythm, you really do start seeing the company grow exponentially.
Well, because it's compounded effects, right? Each person does a great job. And I think like, listen, there's the best of intentions to sort of move every effort forward. Like we have to sort of believe that at the core. But as soon as you start to combine your efforts with the team next to you or the team that's cross-functional from you, it becomes exponential in its output, either through greater transparency. So there is also a component here that you may already have some of these things happening, but now you can define what is actually happening and then make those adjustments to get better, stronger outputs. Or the other side of the spectrum is you now see exactly how things are underperforming. And so you could then make those refined adjustments to get better outputs. So that is phenomenal. So I have a question for you. In curating the data around that revenue impact, right? So whether it be as a result of your silos between marketing and sales, or perhaps your silos between technology and sales or back office, what have you, the data that you end up with, that is found as a result of the changes that you made, correct?
Correct.
Like you're looking at this in a post-mortem situation. Okay, got it. Very cool.
Correct. Yeah. It's not real time. It's post-mortem, going back and saying, well, take a look at what we could have done versus where we are today.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get buy-in on that?
Oh, it was painful, to be able to get, I mean, I'm being brutally honest.
Did the Sicilian come out?
Yeah, probably when I was going home, I was talking in Sicilian. No, it was painful, but I think it got to a point where, take a look at where we are economically today, right? Companies are all kind of struggling with trying to figure out, what do we do different? So it becomes one of those things when you have an organization in front of you and saying, we are where we are. And, my sentiment is, if we change the following course of action, we're going to reap this positivity. It's not going to damage what we currently have already, right? So therefore, why not? Why not try this change as we're trying to leapfrog the company to the next, to the next level, to the next direction. So it was a lot of conversations around that, saying there's going to be no negative impact here. Let's just try this. You can almost pilot it for a period of time and then see what happens. And then you could adapt and adopt, right?
Brilliant angle.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
When everything did finally come together, what was like some of the things that surprised the team? Like, I'm sure that there was some improvement between morale or different clarity of moving forward when you can work together as one instead of separate on your own islands. Or did you see like that immediate increase in like revenue and speed to fill? Or what was some of kind of those first things that you saw?
I love that question because it reminds me, the biggest challenge that I saw is people not appreciating what the other person was working on. Right. So because when you're siloed, you think you're all that and you're doing what you need to do.
Yeah.
Right. And therefore, I mean, how many times have we seen it? I've sat in branches before, and recruiting is like, sales just keeps bringing in purple squirrels. Right. Like, sales doesn't know what they're doing. Right. Meanwhile, sales is like, I bring phenomenal new client opportunities, and recruiting just refuses to work on them because they might be a little bit difficult. It's because there isn't that mutual respect of understanding, what does it take to get that rec from a new logo? And so what I started doing is I started having people shadow each other for a period of time. I want you to be lockstep with the recruiter. I want you to be sitting with the IT department for the next 2 hours and what kind of problem solving are they doing? I want you to sit with marketing and understand what marketing is working on. By doing that and gaining that mutual respect of what everybody's job was, and not that my job is the hardest job and woe with me type of mentality, which sometimes happens in company, that definitely created a paradigm shift in the company. It took time, but I started seeing that all of a sudden the hard recs were being worked on by recruiters because they appreciated the new logo. And therefore they came to a mutual understanding of how much time do we spend on this? Is it, because we don't want to obviate our attention from recs that are really easy to fill. But they worked out their own system where now, guess what? We are tackling the new logos, and sometimes it might be a purple squirrel, but if we land that purple squirrel, it's going to be an incredible entree into that organization. That's going to gain that opportunity that you're trying to go after. And let's face it, clients, and I call everybody a client because even if they're a prospect, eventually I'm going to make them a client. That's kind of like my mindset always, right? But
Right.
They do the purple squirrels as a test. There's so many staffing companies out there, and they do it as a test and see, is anybody seriously going to work on this? So think about it. If it's that diamond in the rough that you go after, you might have just gained a tremendous new opportunity for your organization.
I love it. Honestly, this pattern, it's funny, like we're talking about this in these like very specific elements within an organization, but this pattern shows up everywhere. And every time that we kind of like, we understand the limitation, it's because those threads are running parallel instead of woven together. And, the friction that creates or the struggles that creates, it's real, right? And so I think that it's in there. Like if anyone's listening to this and they're feeling that this concept is resonating, but they don't know why, that they're just like, there's sort of these internal struggles that they can't get over these hurdles, it's very much likely because they are running in these like siloed or threaded kind of mannerisms that aren't set up to be woven the way that they should be. So let's move into where the fabric tears. Yeah. So like, where do you see organizations making structural mistakes? Right. So we're going to get into sort of like that structural piece at this point, and then like actually designing disconnection into the org without realizing it. I think most people have, again, the best of intentions. I think leaders try to create a resilient world where the organization can endure whatever the stresses are that the market creates. But I think sometimes they may create these problems for themselves. So what have you seen people design the flaws into the fabric itself?
Yeah, some of it we've kind of talked a little bit about, but for example, if you take a look at the CMO of the organization and they report into the CFO, for example, right? But then meanwhile, your CRO or CSO are reporting into the COO or the CEO of the company. So you have a different mindset. CFO is usually more financially oriented, and they're going to look to try to minimize cost. And often marketing is viewed as a cost center and not something that they want to necessarily invest in. Meanwhile, your chief revenue officer might be looking at sales needs new tools. We need more collateral. We need, wouldn't it be great if we had a dashboard that we can show our clients when we walk in, which again is going to require IT to be involved, and it's going to require for marketing to be involved. And this is where you start having the disconnects. And a lot of times I've witnessed this in organizations where things just can never get off the dime because you have different philosophies as to who's driving the initiative. And then you try to drag the CEO into the conversation. And like I mentioned, the CEO is pulled in so many different directions. It makes it very difficult for them to be the deciding factor on what's going to happen. So organizational alignment is so key, I think, in how you want to have the smooth operation of your company.
I think that's such a great statement. And you said something about how like marketing gets sometimes pushed aside. And I think about marketing really as like the third wheel, or it gives me kind of a flashback to the movie Dirty Dancing. And I feel like marketing, you guys just roll with it here, where marketing needs to step up and basically say, nobody puts baby in the corner. And because I feel like that's sometimes where marketing needs to step up and say, because they do get pushed into, like you were saying, that finance or the operations. So you never know what I'm going to come up with, Jeff. I like to throw Jeff off oftentimes.
Preach, here. Girl, preach.
That was great. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that going forward. Baby in the corner. I think that's perfect. But I agree with you 100%. I think that happens so often where marketing is, look, as soon as there's COVID happened, I was working at a company, marketing and training were the two places that were immediately cut because we need to save money. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, if anything, I think we need more marketing now because we have to get creative on how do we market in a COVID environment. This is like all in-person sales. And now we're asking to do this via a Zoom call. I mean, like this just doesn't work that way. So it's that different philosophy.
No, completely.
Without a doubt. I think too, we also tend to think that the other departments, and look, I love the support on the marketing side. But like, I think that we do this to each other. Yeah. So I think that we do this to marketing in the same way that we do this to finance, in the same way that we do this to all the like learning and development. I think that we do this the same across the board. We might have an idea, an innovation, an improvement that we want to do organizationally. And we have spent a lot of time building out and ideating and communicating within our pods, right? Or within our thread as to like what it is that we think needs to happen and why it needs to happen. And then what do we do as a result of that? is we call these other groups into a 30-minute meeting. And we're not giving them the time to be able to collect the intelligence or get caught up to where the idea is today. We're looking for a quick response on something. And that quick response isn't necessarily going to beget you the outcome that you want. So I think by sort of setting this weave in motion in advance, it also makes those meetings more meaningful and more productive. You don't end up with a weak spot in your fabric because you didn't allow your operations team to fully invest in the concept yet. So once again, like, I think many departments can be set up as a third wheel. I think whichever ones are generating the most revenue, like that are clearly identifiable as revenue, those are the ones that I would say typically are given more time, but it is the ecosystem that sort of keeps it all together.
Yeah, agreed. I think the challenge is, though, when marketing starts being viewed as not a revenue generating function of the company, right? So it's like finance is a back office, right? So finance is not generating revenue. I think everybody violently agrees to that. It's that it's not any different. I think it's when you start getting into famous conversations I used to have with one of my CFOs. Every time I would embark on, we would do these CIO events. We would do like all sorts of events and stuff. And they would always say, what's the ROI?
Right.
Like, I want to know, like, what clients are we getting out of this? And, and that's a great question. And I totally get why you need to know that. But the reality is it's not a straight line. Right? It's one of these zigzag lines of how I got the person to the event and then they become a client. It could have taken, 58 different fabric weaves in our loom.
Right.
And it wasn't just a one-to-one. They showed up at the event and I won $1 million deal. It doesn't happen that way.
Right.
So, but it's like, but then I often put myself in their shoes and say, well, what could we do to illustrate the revenue potential? Yeah. And that's the part is that, marketing, sales, it's not so black and white, and finance is so black and white, right? As far as how you get from point A to point B. And that becomes the challenge.
Hey, Anna, is there ever a situation where if a certain function, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's operations, is there ever a part where it becomes more powerful when it's actually moved closer to the role of the CEO and the CEO has better vision over it? Have you seen that at all?
Yes, I have seen that. I think a lot of it has to do with size of organization also. Mm-hmm. I think it becomes more challenging when you start getting into, the billion plus size companies. The CEO starts getting pulled in so many different directions that they might not have the bandwidth to be able to play an active role in making decisions as to the direction. And then you wind up having a tier that kind of goes off and does their own thing, so to speak. But I do agree that if you have the right size company, the CEO is the king and queen of the organization and can definitely play a significant role in orchestrating the direction.
Totally makes sense completely. And that's good to know because I think that's a powerful lesson for different people as they're growing, like especially as CEOs, new CEOs, ones that are coming into different organizations, just kind of having better understanding of all of the different functions can also help play into it. And if the CEO is really the shuttle, as we've learned what it's called on a loom. So when your CEO becomes your shuttle, it really does help make sure that everything does have alignment and that you have, I'm like even thinking like DNA strands, you're all like kind of entwined together, which can be part of your, a beautiful creation that you can have here. Shuttle learning. We're learning about shuttles.
The more you know. The more you know. Like an after school special.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this. And I will just point out too, like Anna, you mentioned like ROI, and ROI is, I think it's a very critical element of running a business, making sure that you're investing in areas that are going to continue to help you to improve. I think when you have a hard time in being able to create that direct line to the revenue itself, I think that's the opportunity to zoom out from what it is that you're trying to look at. So if you find that you have a blind spot getting from point A to to revenue, whatever that is. Like you may have multiple points in between. Maybe what we do is look at metrics that show you influence. So from the sales and marketing piece itself, is the sales cycle shorter? Are there, do you have more resources that you can share? Are you able to start more conversations? Like all of those things start to identify the elements that you need to continue building out those pipelines, but they are supporting mechanisms to eventual revenue. So I love the conversation around ROI. I think that the traditional sense of it, we need to start to adjust in order to serve what this market is that we have, right? Because it's the market that we have today. It's different than what we had before, and I don't think it's ever going back to what we had before. I think the cat is out of the bag. I think it's going to be hard to put it back in. This is awesome. I absolutely love this. So if we were to, if the evidence is clear, what's the one thing that's keeping leaders from weaving their organizations together?
I think sometimes it's fear, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen next. It also depends on where you are and when you entered the organization, right? So, for example, if you enter into an organization and it's been running like this for the last 20 years, and now you come in with the idea, hey, guess what? We're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to do the following. That might be a little too radical, right? So it's like, how do you create that transition that becomes comfortable for everybody in the organization? So I think those are probably two of the biggest areas that I see is fear, the unknown, the uncertainty, and then your own, how long you've been in the company to be able to make those suggestions to start making some changes. Now, what I have done is you start with baby steps. I worked at a company where I did not have responsibility for marketing, but then I pitched the idea that marketing should be more aligned to sales. So the CMO should report into me. So like that, we can make sure that our, campaigns are aligned. We can measure lead conversion. So it became a very natural conversation to say, yeah, organizationally, this makes sense. And it's the least amount of impact to make that change overnight, so to speak. But start with baby steps.
That totally makes sense. So if I am a change maker within an organization and I am new, like to your recommendation where you recommended to the leadership team, you were newer there, but if I'm someone who's trying to make a difference, what should I do? What are the different steps and recommendations? I'm not in leadership. I realize that there needs to be a structural change here. We need to start weaving our fabrics together. What would be a recommendation you'd make for someone?
So I think with any situation, I always say, don't just present the problem. You need to be able to present a possible solution, which means that you need to understand all the facts that go into that, right? This cannot be an emotional, this just isn't working and we need to make the changes for the following reason. So do your homework. Right? Make sure that you understand all the different components, all the different players that are involved, and then evaluate what are the possible paths that you can go down. Now, you might come up with 3 different solutions that totally will not work, but the fact that you've gone through that effort and exercise is a great illustration to leadership that you're vested in the future of the company, and therefore you'll be taken more seriously in regards to the recommendations that you're making. So that would be my suggestion.
I think those are great recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Come to the table with some solutions, even if they're not fully capable solutions. Come to the table with the problem and then what your ideation has been. It could be the catalyst that kind of gets you moving to the next thing. I think the one main takeaway that I'm getting from all this, right, is that threads don't weave themselves, right? That's why they're on spools. They don't weave this up. They need someone to build that structure and to create that cause, so that way they can go to what's going to happen next. If someone's listening to this right now and they recognize that they are in a fraying organization, this has really sort of codified it for them. They understand now that perhaps organizationally they're set up in too much of a linear fashion as opposed to being woven. What do you think is the thread that they should pull on?
Oh, I think the thread that you probably should focus on, I'll say, versus pull on, is the thread that impacts revenue growth the most, right? Because that is going. Now, the reason why I hesitate from the word pull is because you don't want to be in a situation of a house of cards and all of a sudden you've destroyed something that's, been working. But that's where I would poke my head in trying to understand and solve and figure out, how do we make this whole process better?
I love that. That was a mic drop moment there. You thought about that? That was like, end everything right now. We are like wrapping up. I mean, what a great lesson to truly like have for so many people that are listening. I'm going to change gears here, Anna, because we're talking about mic drop, but I'm going to pick back up the mic. And if one of the things we like to ask all of our guests is about their walk-up song. So I want to know, you had your mic drop moment, but if we like rewind and that's my rewind moment. And you were coming back on from the very moment, and we have you walking on stage or into our fun little studio here. What is that walk-up song that you are playing?
Oh my goodness. So I am a huge Lady Gaga fan.
Ooh, love Lady Gaga.
And therefore love her, love everything about her, and a poker face. I'm in sales. I got to have a poker face. So I think that would be a great walk-up song.
Oh my God, that is perfect.
That's epic.
I love that. And I've seen Lady Gaga a few times. She's absolutely phenomenal. She is great. And I think that's a perfect song for you. I think this is excellent. And
let's be honest, you might need to have a good poker face if you're going to bring these concepts to your teams to be like, here's what I'm projecting. Like, here's what I think we should do. Like, think of us all as threads, but we're going to go into a fabric and we're going to weave this together. Like, you might need a good poker face to pull this off too. So I think that's also pretty relevant to the topic.
I agree.
But what you create at the end is going to be beautiful. So that is amazing there. So Anna, this has been incredibly valuable, especially kind of like everything that you brought to us, all the key insights has been so helpful. So thank you so much for being on the show and for everything that you do for our community across the board. Like, we can't thank you enough here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really been my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we've loved it.
No, honestly, you're a legend in the space. Like, everybody knows who you are. It's always so good to see you enter a room. Like, it just feels like everything lights up. And especially when you're in panels and stuff, it really is great to get your insights and your wisdom. I think that the community really benefits a lot from what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And Anna, for someone that is out there that's trying to they want to learn more from you, they want to get in contact, what's the best way for people to connect with you? Sure.
Well, LinkedIn is always a great way. And you can find me as Anna Frazzetto. So 2 N's and 2 Z's and 2 T's. Or you can email me at anna@afmstrategicpartners.com.
This is perfect. Excellent.
Awesome. Do you have any events coming up? Are you going to be going to any of the industry events?
So I'm going to SIA. And
fantastic.
In March. Yeah. So looking forward to that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I will just say we are not done with Anna yet. We are going to run a part 2 on this, where we're going to really dig into the hard part of the conversation and how you actually build the loom. So how you're going to communicate across those threads so that the messaging lands and the rollout holds. So stay tuned for that. But if Anna's stories didn't get your attention, real revenue impact, real consequences just from the departments not being woven together, then I don't know what will. We're going to pick up this conversation real soon. In part 2, we're going to talk about how to fix what you have happening in your organizations, how to build that loom, how to communicate those things so that they land, and how to stop assuming everyone sees the same pattern you do. So you're not going to want to miss part 2 of that segment.
Exactly. I mean, we are going to build it and create something beautiful together. And so if this hit home, please feel free to share it with a leader who is potentially feeling frayed, and tag us, send us a message. We want to hear where your fabric is tearing. So thank you everyone for listening to Highly Adaptive. Have a great rest of your week. And we will see you in part 2 with Anna for our next episode of Highly Adaptive.
Big thanks to Allied Insight, not just our sponsor, but an industry leader and preferred marketing partner to staffing and consulting businesses nationwide. If your firm is looking for expert-level support that goes beyond the logo, you know where to go, alliedinsight.com. If this episode helped you, share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, consider leaving us a review, and when you're ready for more industry insights, articles, case studies, and more, find it on allthingsstaffing.com. This episode was produced and edited by Allied Insight, and the music provided by Home Music Stock. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.